Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing Content Extravaganza. And if this is your first time here, you couldn't possibly know that I am on a mission to give you everything you could possibly need if you are looking to be more successful in your business, providing, of course, what you need to be more successful in your business is to know more about and be implementing more enthusiastically, efficiently, and effectively sales and marketing in your business, which is, of course, what you need. You need more customers more profitably if you're going to be more successful in your business. So what goes on here is I'm giving you everything I know about sales and marketing. That happens on a Monday in the What The series. On a Tuesday, I put in anyone I can find with experience that's going to be useful to you. If you are looking to be more successful in your business, that's Talk Marketing. Every other Wednesday, Melanie Farmer comes through. We look at the marketing news and we speculate wildly about what it might mean for you in your business, in your marketing life. And on the other Wednesday, I review so you don't have to. On a Thursday, very soon, I'll be thinking out loud. And on a Friday, we are reviewing the very best and the very worst of marketing content on the internet. So if that sounds like it might be interesting and useful, please tell me it does, because we're only here to be interesting and useful. Now would be a great time to like, share, comment, subscribe, because that will give us the motivation to continue on this epic, epic journey. So if you're catching us on the day this goes live, it will be a Tuesday, which means that we have a guest for you. And today's guest has a BA in International Business and Modern Languages and an MBA with a specialism in employee motivation in a home environment. She has sales and marketing experience going back to 2002. She has held a variety of roles, including brand manager, national account manager, national sales manager, global project manager, retail manager, and those are all, interestingly, in the paint industry. She is currently an accredited business partner with Transform Performance International, Anecdote partner with Anecdote International, and regional facilitator with the Raine Group, as well as running her business, The Small Stuff, since 2019. She was introduced to us by the massively positive Larry Long Jr., who you have yet to experience, and he tells us that she is doing great work with multinational corporations, and her thoughts and philosophies on sales always get him thinking as she goes in deep on sales. What you won't know about her is that she once sold anti-slip floor paint on QVC in Germany in front of a reported 5 million people. Today's guest is Susie Mathieson. Good afternoon, Susie.
Hello, good to see you, Martin.
It's good to see you. Shall we pretend that this isn't the third time that we've tried to do this and I've already screwed it up twice?
Yeah, let's pretend as though we've never met each other before.
Let's pretend like that. Let's pretend it's like that. How are you doing today? Are you well?
I'm really good, thank you. It's the end of my day because I had to get up super early to deliver some online training for the APAC region, so mainly India, a bit of Australian and Singaporeans were there too. So yeah.
Okay, so you started early and you finished early.
Yes, it's great.
Excellent.
Actually. The sun's still shining. I can go out and enjoy the day after this.
And you're in Cologne, are you?
I'm in Cologne in Germany, yeah.
Very nice. I really like Cologne in Germany. And I think the thing about it is that British people don't really understand how cool Germany actually is. I didn't before I went there.
I hear that a lot, although it's getting better. Once you come to Germany, you will always want to come back, I think, whether it's for the scenery, the people, or more likely the beer. Then Germany's a great place to visit. And if you are in the UK, then it's only a short weekend hop, like a 1 hour flight, or you can come across on the tunnel as well. So, only across the waters there from the UK, which is lovely.
Yes, and you have the Colts, don't you, in Cologne?
Yeah, we have Kolsch, which is the teeny tiny glasses. They're 0.2 litres of like a glass, and they serve you your beer. And the cool thing is that when you go to one of the traditional brew houses, if you don't put your beer mat on top of your glass when you're finished, they'll automatically bring you a new glass full of beer. So it just keeps on coming until you tell them to stop.
And they put little tallies on your beer mat so they know how many that you've had. And you get really drunk because you don't really ever feel like you're drinking a lot. That's my experience.
Correct.
And then the other thing is the restaurant just on the other side of the river where they serve the big knuckles and they're incredibly rude. Do you know that restaurant?
Well, that's every single brew house in Cologne. They're all famous for being very rude, and they all sell pig knuckle.
Okay.
So I reckon I do know. You're probably talking about the Deutsche Brauhaus across the river, perhaps.
Yes.
But yeah, pig knuckle is delicious. So
It's
yeah,
so
can't have
delicious.
too many of them though.
Yes. This place is, I think, the most famous one. So if you're talking about the most famous one, it's probably that one. They famously turned down Clinton, apparently, because Clinton wanted to come,
Lommies.
or one of the
Mm,
presidents. What's that?
it's Lommies, yeah. So
It's
I
Lommy's.
have never. I've only been there once, and yes, they did famously tell Bill Clinton to go somewhere else. I was going to
Yeah,
be rude there,
because
but I thought, oh, I may maybe not be able to swear on this. So, yeah, they told Clinton to go somewhere else, and yeah,
yes, because
didn't
he
want to
wanted to
let down the
close the place
president.
down to put his security in there, and they're just like, no, we're not doing that for our customers.
Yeah.
Interestingly, my buddy, I've been there a couple of times. My buddy asked them if he could have some mayonnaise, and they said, sure, you can go and buy some from the kiosk.
Seriously,
Seriously, like they are so, like, it famously is their thing there. I think that they are so rude. I love that, but the food is just so amazing as well, and they won't help you to a table. And that's the only place in Cologne where your Colts doesn't get filled up automatically, because they just basically, it feels like a real imposition that you've gone there to eat. It really does. They make it feel really bad and weird. Okay, so talking about weird things, like before we get into it properly, I mentioned the fact that you have this specialism on your MBA in motivation in a home environment, because it seems to me that got really pertinent in the last couple of years. And even now, where you're obviously teaching online, like this, because I just think sales is motivation. That's what I think it is. So, like the fact that you have a specialism in that, when the lockdowns happened, you must have thought, right, this is it. This is where all my academic training turns into euros.
well, the spooky thing was that I was still doing my MBA when lockdown hit. So October 19, I submitted that as a thesis suggestion and said, I'm really interested in people's motivation in a home office environment. Can I write my thesis on it? And they went, yeah, sure. And then 6 months later, I had hundreds of people I could interview to actually ask them what it was like being in a home office environment and working there full time. So
Yes.
I basically completely tweaked. Well, my master's thesis was then on that, but I was able to actually get so much information on it, speaking to people. It was just perfectly timed and super spooky because it was almost like I could see into the future, which I can't, sadly.
That is a little
So,
bit sad, or else you could have given us
ooh,
some winners in some races
I
and
know.
some
Yeah, I'd
lottery
be
numbers.
rich.
That would have been really useful. So, were you not tempted then? Because the whole world obviously was then in that situation where everyone was working from home. Were you not drawn to just becoming like the world's leading authority on employee motivation in a home environment?
Well, I guess I could have been or could have tried to be, but I am passionate about sales and I wanted to help all the salespeople in that home office environment. So for me, it wasn't really about you need to do this and you need to make sure employees have got that. I mean, sure, that's all super important and there's varying things you can do to make sure that your employees are motivated at home, regardless of what role they do. But for me, the focus has always been about sales, and it was so important at that time to let those salespeople know, I know what you're going through. I know that probably a lot of you are missing out on that team interaction and that learning from each other. So let's make the best of it and let's do some really, really cool virtual trainings to help you continue to stay motivated, because training is one way you can motivate your employees, of course. And so that's where I really focused. And I'm really glad I did because it was really enjoyable for me as well. I am on my own in my home. And I just moved to a brand new city at the time. I moved to Cologne on the 1st of March 2020. I knew nobody. So I was really happy to have that focus of all these salespeople around me in a virtual room suddenly to keep me motivated as well. So there was a selfish bit to it.
Yes, excellent. And I understand that it threw up, like for sales especially, it threw up lots of challenges, because I think people, once they got over the shock, they started thinking, well, that's okay, we'll just start scheduling meetings again. But of course, they're meeting people from their home to the prospect's home, and the prospect doesn't necessarily want you in there. Do you know what I mean? It's, as I
Mm-hmm.
understand it, there was that dynamic going on.
There was. It was a very interesting change curve, I suppose you could watch, and probably most people can familiarise themselves or also empathise with this. So there was this phase right at the beginning, which was, oh, this is new and exciting, and how cool, and oh, how novel that I don't have to get into my car. And people were available on the phone to talk. They were available on emails. There was these couple of weeks where nothing was really happening because people hadn't got into the gear change. And so if you were in a cold calling role at that time and you were on the ball, you would actually be able to reach a lot of decision makers because suddenly their mobile phone numbers were available or the switchboard were transferring them to their mobiles directly and they had time to talk. So there was this golden probably month or 6 weeks where you could really get hold of people to talk. And then everybody cottoned on to that fact. Everybody invested in technology. They invested in Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it was that they needed. And suddenly we filled our diaries with virtual meetings, so much so that we have no time to do anything else anymore. So that was kind of the flip. And also people started to get fed up of working from home all day, every day. I think there's this novelty if you work from home like 1 or 2 times a week, that's fun and nice, but you still want to go into the office. I'm talking from my own point of view here. There's plenty of people who love working from home all the time. But I think there was this kind of shift the other way of being so fed up, and actually the motivation dropped heavily within 2 to 3 months of the lockdown because people started to realize this isn't a short thing. This is a long-term problem that we're going to have to deal with for a while. Oh my goodness, my life's so boring. Kind of that was the curve that everybody I felt like went through when I was speaking to them. How was it for you?
Well, interestingly, where I am, we didn't really have much in the way of lockdowns. It was I did some virtual stuff, which is nice. I'm still doing some virtual stuff very occasionally. So we didn't really get affected the way that people in Europe got affected. So I kind of feel like I dodged a bullet. And I think the thing is like if it's forced, then it very quickly does become something you don't want to do. Like if it's an option, then it might be a nice option. Do you know what I mean? It might be the worst option, but it might be a nice option. But when it's forced, when you don't have any choice whatsoever, then I think it does become quite depressing. It could become quite depressing. So the other thing I'm interested in is like the cultural thing of like you being in Germany, and I'm interested to know what it's like selling to Germans, and if it's like if it's different. I don't know if you've got that experience that you can compare in the UK because they are quite different personalities, aren't they, German people?
They can be. I think they're accused of being far more different than they really are. The Germans would typically be associated with directness and efficiency, right? So that's what people tend to associate with the stereotypical German. And there are a few of them around, but there are also equally others around. Um, but actually, it's what I appreciate in the Germans compared with the Brits. I love my people. I love the fact that I'm from Britain, and I wouldn't want to change that. However, we're really bad at saying no to people in the UK. We will do everything we possibly can to fob somebody off as politely as possible. And actually, we've got no interest whatsoever. So if you imagine that kind of cold call scenario, and it doesn't have to be, it could be further down the track when you're in the account management scenario too. You've got the Brit who's like, hmm, let me think about it for a little while. Yeah, I really like it, but I just need to think about it. And in the back of their head, they're just thinking, no, not for me. I'm never going to answer a call from this number ever again, right? Because they haven't got the guts to say, it's not for me, thank you. Whereas a German would be far more direct. And again, I'm being stereotypical of both nationalities here, sorry. But that's what I appreciate about the Germans is they're just a little bit more direct. And if something doesn't make sense, they'll tell you. And then you'll either get the opportunity to explain or change their mind or not. But they'll be more direct, so you know where you stand. And I really appreciate that because one of the things that I talk to about in trainings that I do especially with inside sales reps, so the people who are doing those cold calling environments, is a no is a good thing. It's saving you time. It's stopping you having to waste your time ever ringing that number again or picking up the phone to that person again. Focus your attention on somewhere else. There are plenty of people out there who you can contact. We haven't really got a finite list. So take no's as good, disqualify them, next, on you go. And that's why that's where I see the Germans as being actually quite helpful in the sales process.
I really think so as well, because English people are just a nightmare, like trying to be nice all the time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, because I think it goes both ways. I think the salesman's trying to be really nice, and the prospect's trying to be really nice, and they've not really, either of them, got any intention of actually affecting a change. Do you know what I mean? It's weird, and I like that idea. I share that idea that no's are really good. I used to do a presentation called "The Most Powerful Close in the World Ever." And it was just literally the word no. Like, no, I'm not going to sell you this thing. No, I'm not getting what I need from you. No, it doesn't look like you're going to. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise, what happens then is salespeople think they're doing the right thing. They're lugging around this huge pipeline, which they're hoping one day is going to come to fruition. But all that's really happened is they've never given anyone the opportunity to say no. And if they're selling to English people, then of course they've never said no. But they've got no interest or intent to actually do anything, So good. I think we're going to agree on a lot today. That's the way I'm feeling about this, because we've touched on these things already. So shall we bring some order to this? Shall we do that?
We can do. Yeah, I'm just
Okay,
worried
good.
that the agreement is going to be boring for the listeners, but we'll try and make it
Well,
interesting.
maybe, I don't think it will be, well, I don't think we'll be boring. Let's aim for somewhere above boring, shall we?
All right.
So
Yeah,
I
we
don't
can
think we'll
edit
be
this bit out,
boring.
can't we?
The thing is, I think everyone's just wrong about sales. And I'm getting a sense from you that you're not. So basically, this is going to be an exercise in reinforcement. I said in a podcast recently, the one that went up today with NEERAJ, and I just said, look, if you think sales is difficult, you're doing it wrong. It's as simple as that. And I think everybody is. So we just need to drive that message home today. Okay, cool. So you know that there are only 5 questions. The first question is, how are you qualified to talk to us about... I wanted to ask you how you sell paint. We'll have to do that another time. I wanted to... So the questions are, how are you qualified to talk to us about your specialist subject? Who do you work with? How do you add value to their lives? What is your recommendation for anyone looking to get better at your specialist subject? What should people read? And who can you throw under the bus in the way that Larry threw you under the bus, who might endure or maybe even enjoy to have a conversation like this with me? So those are the 5 questions. So let's nail firstly your specialist subject. What is your specialist subject?
My specialist subject is sales, and specifically beliefs in sales.
Beliefs in sales. Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, good. So those are keywords that we haven't tried for yet. So the question then, very simply, how are you qualified, Susie Matheson, to talk to us about beliefs in sales?
Well, first of all, I have to talk about my love of sales. I think you had a guest on recently who also said that she had a love of sales. I think Jules said that she was a mega fan of sales, and that's the same for me. I'm one of those rare individuals that actually chose a job in sales rather than fell into it like lots of people. So I'd like to think that my experience gives me something to say about this. But specifically around beliefs in sales, when I took the change and went from being in sales individual contributor roles and sales leader roles to being a sales trainer and coach, I found something called the salesperson secret code. It sounds like I'm in a secret club. It's not. So the salesperson secret code is a book that was written by some chaps in Britain and the US. So it was written by Ian Mills, Mark Ridley, and a couple of others as well. There's too many names on the book to name. And they wanted to look into what makes the top salespeople the top salespeople. Is it something that we're born into, or is it something that we can affect? Because if it's something we're born into, then tough luck. You've either got it or you haven't. But if it's something we can learn, then that's good news for anybody who wants to get into sales. And what they did was they wrote a book, and then they created a psychometric test where you can test where you are on this level. And they qualify people in teaching it and bringing it to the masses. And so I am an accredited or a qualified salesperson secret code coach. And that's why I would suggest that I am qualified to talk about this. Did I pass your test?
Because you've got a qualification. Well, not yet. No, it's not as simple as that.
Damn it.
I'll let you know when you pass. And if you don't, it's going to be an absolute disaster for this whole exercise because no one's failed yet. I'm dreading the day that somebody fails. Okay, so you have that one particular qualification in the beliefs part. Okay, good. I want to touch on, but we don't need to talk, but it's been a while since I've spoken about sales, but I say the same thing all the time because I really believe it. When I was at school, was the Larry kid that was always getting into trouble for getting too much attention and getting thrown out of classes and all of that stuff. And I think, it's too late for me, obviously, but I think someone should have sat me down and said, look, Martin, all this attention demanding, making people laugh stuff, it's going to be really useful for you when you go and have a career in sales. But they didn't say that to me because there's no... I don't think I even existed. I don't think I even knew that sales existed until I entered the job market. And I fell into sales because I had a degree in politics and what else was I going to do as opposed to you. But, I mean, there's been some great quotes recently, like Simon Bowen, who I'm a little bit in love with, said, we should make sales the most noble thing that we do. Because... quite simply, without sales, you don't have a business. But it's like salespeople are the top of the pile always. Like they are, and however you think about it, they shouldn't be. Because salespeople are having relationships with your prospective customers. Like, so they are your direct access to the market, like the market who could be buying your stuff. I've got issues with this. I've really got issues with this. And so I think, to challenge you a little bit, so we're not boring, I think before we get to the beliefs of the salespeople, we have to address the beliefs of the entire world about the function of sales, and then we can think about salespeople. Are you reaching for a reference?
I'm reaching for a reference, yeah. So I have just grabbed this book, which is called... How Good Humans Sell by Catherine Brown.
Excellent.
And she talks about this in the respectability ratings. She did this test. I was just having a look at the numbers, and they had 7 roles that they talked about, and a doctor is the most respectable on this scale, and salesperson is the least respected on this scale. And you've got entrepreneur, plumber, IT support. There's these different roles. Now, it's only a small sample. It's also only a small list of professions. But I remember writing a post about this on LinkedIn because I would love for kids, when they're asked at school to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? To say, I want to be in sales, and really understand what it's about. Because sales it's about relationships. And the people who sell well are the ones that really are good at building that relationship with people. It doesn't mean that they're loud and leery and always people. They could be quiet introverts as well, but they have an interest in the relationship, and they have an interest in building that relationship and serving others. And I would love to start a campaign with you, Martin, where kids learn, first of all, that this job exists, and secondly, say that they want to be in it.
Good. Well, let's do that, because I think, like, on the other side of that, for the first 10 years that I was in work, I was in sales, and I had an absolute blast. And I had a counterpoint, because between sixth form and university, I dug the roads, and we had a job cleaning out storm drains. So these were basically 6x6 rooms under the roads that were full to the brim with mud, and that was our job one summer, was just to clean on an estate in Brighton. It was foul. So I had a counterpoint. But my sales career has taken me all over the world. You know, it's taken me to Cricket World Cup finals. It's taken me on fishing trips. It's taken me, it's been amazing. And I don't know how many people sell in the UK Like, are there 1 million people employed as salespeople in the UK? It's not. It
It could be. I
it
don't
really
know.
could be, yeah. So
If
the
you look
number
at,
of people. Sorry, shall I
I
Google
was
it
just
right
in,
now? Okay, so the number of people who actually end up selling is vast, and nobody in the education system even seems to know that this is a function of business. It
it is
astounds
mad.
me.
It's mad. So there's two examples here of sales and how important it is in companies. So I used to work in a small startup with about 30 employees. 12 of them were in sales. So nearly half of the whole company were in sales. That's a startup example. I was speaking to, are we allowed to say company names on here, or should I try and disguise the company name? Big
I don't know.
database company that's very popular worldwide, and
Okay,
everybody knows them. And I was speaking to somebody in the Middle East yesterday who is one of 300 employed sales trainers in that company. So if they've got
okay,
300 sales trainers worldwide, imagine how many sales people they've got worldwide.
yes.
Um, Sales is really important. It's
Sales is
it.
really important because if you don't have sales, you don't have customer. Well, like sometimes, like so, maybe we need to qualify it a little bit and just say that there are other ways that sales happen through online, like through websites or e-commerce or retail, but they're still salespeople, I would say. So there are other ways that sales happen. You know what? In 2021, according to Statista, there were 1,002,800 salespeople employed in the UK, and in 2022, that dropped to 888,000. So my guess at 1 million is not too far off. So it's a significant number of people, and they're delivering a significant amount of value, i.e., they're bringing the money into businesses that wouldn't have it otherwise and wouldn't be in business otherwise. And the whole education system seems to have no idea that this even goes on, and that the relationship kids, the Larry kids. What astounds me is whenever I meet a financial advisor, they always strike me as the kid that was the bully at school. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever experienced that feeling. But yeah, but they're all salespeople. And you've also got the qualification in leadership. So sales is leadership, and salespeople go on to lead companies. Because if you've got the ability to influence and build relationships and motivate people, that's what selling is, then you get to run companies. There's a huge disconnect here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there really is. And just take it back to the school example. I bet you a lot of the parents are in sales roles of some description as well. So,
Yes.
I would guess if you've got 1 million people in the UK, that's what's that? That's more than 1% of the population are in sales of the whole population. So the working population is probably more like, I don't know, 3% are in
Yes.
sales. So that means that in a class or in a year of 100 kids, you'll have at least 3 to 4 parents, if not more, who are in sales. So, or or come into contact with sales, because you don't work in an office as an accountant and not know what sales does
No.
either.
There's
So
3.1 million people in the UK working in retail,
there you
which is
go.
also sales. So there you go. We're at 4 million people. So we're at more than 10% of the population. But what the school system's doing is get everyone ready to work in factories when all those jobs were shipped out of the country anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's insane. It is insane.
Do you
So,
remember doing like a test at school where you had to like fill in your like likes and dislikes, and then it told you what your ideal job was? Did you ever do that at school with like the
no.
careers office?
No, I
I did
had one
it.
careers meeting, which I'll happily tell you about. You tell me about you filling in the test. What happened?
Well, I filled in the test, and I really, really, really wanted to be cabin crew when I was a kid. So I tried to manipulate the test so that it would come out with I should be cabin crew, even though I'm only 5'2". So at the time when I would have become cabin crew, I wouldn't have been able to. And I came out as my ideal job would be a prison officer.
That's terrible. Shall I tell you about my careers meeting? It's worse. So I was really interested in drama, and I got selected for things in drama when I was in school. And there wasn't much because I was in school in the 80s when there were strikes every other week. So there wasn't much drama going on. But I always got selected and I did really well in drama. And I auditioned for Oliver Twist on the BBC when I was about 12 or 13. And they declined me. Do you know why they declined me or why I failed the audition? It's because my cheeks were too fat.
No.
When I was 12. So I was always interested in drama. I didn't look hungry enough, no. Like the opposite. I looked like I was overfed. So I had...
No, you've had plenty.
You fat kid. Where does that go? I had one, I think it might have been a sixth form. No, it might have been, I don't know where it was. It might have been a school, it might have been a sixth form. I had one careers meeting in my entire life. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd really like to work in television. And they said, well, there's a television factory on the industrial estate. So maybe you can start there and you might be able to work your way up. That's insane, isn't it? It's insane. And now, of course, just to show what idiots they are, I'm on television now. Whenever I fancy it, because television is YouTube and we're all TV stars. So, yeah, but it just blows my mind. Right, so there's one whole set of beliefs. Like the whole education system doesn't even know that sales exists. And it's probably 10% of the population. Now, if we were to take into account customer service people, there's 10 million of those. So we're getting towards 50% of the population are in some sort of customer-facing situation. And the schools are doing absolutely nothing about it. I mean, maybe, I don't think they are.
Need to lobby immediately.
Yes. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. So there we go. So the whole education system has absolutely no idea that sales is a thing or customer-facing is a thing. Then businesses have weird attitudes to it. Then the general population have, let's not say weird, let's just say horrible attitudes towards it. The general population has horrible attitudes towards it. So it's no wonder then that salespeople also have dubious beliefs about selling. Is it? Are we on the right track? Are we solving the mystery?
Well, we could be. I mean, I think we've just tarred everybody with the same brush with regards businesses. There are plenty of businesses out there who know how important the sales function is. And there are plenty of businesses out there who are investing heavily in their sales teams because they know if they haven't got sales, they haven't got anything. So, for example, one of the projects I worked on last year, a large multinational telecommunications company here in Germany invested in 500 of their reps, and they gave each of these 500 account managers, reps, leaders in sales, 5 days of one-on-one coaching each. So that's investment, and that's belief that sales is where it's at and where it happens. So these things do happen, and there are investments. And I think what we take for granted or what we forget about is what we talked about right at the beginning about motivation. We're humans. And so we need to be motivated, and we need to feel like what we're doing is worthy. We need to feel like what we're doing is going to be contributing to the success of the team, the company, my back pocket as well, like depending on how you think. And often I feel that the sales bit gets taken for granted, and sales leaders stand there and go, right, sell, come on. And they don't take them by the hand. They don't show them they're important. They don't do that bit. And I think that can get in the way of some sales success as well.
Okay, good. And 100%. I mean, the difference between you and I probably is that I've been working at the other end of the scale. I'm not working. I mean, I am occasionally. I mean, now exclusively I'm working with big companies. But historically, like when I ran my agency as an agency, I was working with small companies, not even medium, I wouldn't say. And there they do, because I think the whole world has a weird attitude to sales. So even in those corporations who might be investing 5 days in every one of 500 salespeople, there will be some of the weirdness will be going on. Like, because, I mean, we can talk about what the weirdness is, but like the weirdness, like the relationship between sales and marketing is always weird. Like nobody seems to understand that it's a chronology that marketing do all the product development, market understanding, blah, 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 lead generation, and then leads are the work of salespeople. So nobody really seems to understand that. I mean, there are styles of businesses which are essentially sales organizations. So a SaaS business is essentially a sales organization. Like the tech companies that you're working with are essentially sales organizations. They really get it. But even then, it's like there typically seems to be a disconnect between what marketing are doing and what salespeople are doing. And then there's a gulf in between. And salespeople normally have to fill that gulf, and they can't do it effectively or efficiently because they haven't got the budgets or the databases or the websites or the whatever. So I am persisting in tarring with the same brush, but I think there's always some weirdness around sales, always.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it's interestingly, again, in this book by Catherine Brown, she does a survey about what do you think about salespeople, and I think she even puts the word icky as one of the descriptive words in there that people use, and even salespeople themselves describe themselves as icky sometimes. If you think about it, I mean, and it used to be me actually, even though I chose a career in sales and I love being in sales. I used to excuse myself. You know, when you're in the party situation, somebody asks you the question, "What do you do?" It's a good litmus test as to whether you like your job or not. And I used to be so embarrassed to say, "Oh, I'm in, yeah, I work in paint," or I do anything I possibly could rather than say I'm in sales. And now ask me that question, and I'm like, I'm in sales, and I bloody well love it. And it's different. But back then, say 10, 15 years ago, I was not proud of the fact that I worked in sales, even though inside me I loved it. I didn't feel like it was socially accepted to be in sales. So I think we need to get rid of that ick. And I don't know where it comes from, but I see it pretty much every day with people trying to just do their job and either feeling embarrassed or worried about offending the person they're about to contact, be that telephone, email, meetings. You don't want to be a burden. And we need to get over that. Sure, persistent cold calling is annoying for anybody, but most people just want to help. Most people have got something they think is going to help the person at the other end of the phone, at the other end of the meeting, and it's up to them to figure out quickly whether it's a match or not. And I don't think that's annoying.
No, I don't think it's annoying, but I mean, like, especially in the UK, the cold calling is just incessant. It's like, yeah, I mean, the people in their homes are getting that constantly. So what do I think about that? I think about, just to go back to the motivation thing, I had another presentation called "I'm in the Mood for Selling," which was great. I had them all up dancing to the Nolan Sisters at the end. But I covered motivation in that. The thing about the thing about the motivation is that we have to be self-starters because we are creating the work. If you work in accounts, the work comes to you. If you work in compliance, the work comes to you. If you're working in production and the salespeople are doing their job, the work comes to you. Like I've turned up in jobs, and there's been a desk and a telephone, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? There isn't, or a directory, or so. It really is strongly about motivation. And I remember being embarrassed to tell people that I was in sales as well. It's just weird, isn't it? Isn't it just weird?
It's a shame. It's a real shame because there's so many people out there who do good stuff and they don't get recognised because of the few that do bad stuff and get noticed. So most people out there are good salespeople. Most people out there want to do a good job and they want to do it in a kind and helpful way. But there are just a few people, and I think it's a handful out there that do it badly and give it that bad name, and so you don't want to be associated with it. So we need to change the world. We need to change the world, Martin. I think you and I can do it together.
I think we can do it together, and I'm willing to do it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do here with my little podcast. What did I want to say? I wanted to say that I don't think it's the minority. I think it's the majority. I think that the sales industry is large, and again, we're coming at this from very different ends of maybe even different sticks. But even him, like, they do studies, don't they? They did studies, and they say that like only 10% of people in the whole of work are actually effective. They're doing the work for everyone. And I think that's probably even worse in sales. I think it might be 5% of the salespeople are doing the work of everyone. I remember being like, when I started selling media, I was in one of these big media sales rooms in London. There might have been 200 of us on the floor. I would say at least 190 were really not doing very well, you know. I mean, I think like it's time to introduce you to my brand hero, who's Toto off of The Wizard of Oz. So you know when Toto goes in and when they go into the Emerald City and all the lights are going off and the fireworks and all these things, and then Toto goes into the corner and pulls down the curtain and you see it's just the old geezer turning the wheel. It's the whole thing. Because I think people have got it 180 degrees wrong. They're facing in completely the wrong direction. I think that the majority of salespeople think that their job is to foist products on people. I think the majority of businesses think it's their job to foist products on people. That's what I think. Whereas I suspect the way you think is that salespeople should be out there to serve people and to find out what their challenges are and to provide them with solutions to overcome those challenges. I don't know. I'm talking too much. What do you think?
One thing you should know about me is I'm the eternal optimist, and maybe that's why I like being in sales, because I'm full of hopium all the time. So I would like to think that the majority of people do not go into work to try and push something onto somebody that doesn't need it. You know, if you think about the classic door-to-door salesman who tries to sell something to the old lady, double glazing to the old lady who really doesn't need it because she only had it done 5 years ago, and spins that tale. I don't think those people exist in the majority, and if they do, then I'd be very sad to find that out. I think the majority of people who go into a sales role, I mean, people don't go into work and say, I want to fleece somebody today. Most people go into work and say, I want to do a good job. Most people don't go in and say, I want to do as bad a job as possible today and work. I mean, of course, there'll be those people. They want to do a good job. They want to try. But what they possibly don't have to be able to do it are the tools or the means or the help or the support to be able to do it properly. Because you're right, you have to be a self-starter in sales in the majority of cases. And that's really tricky. Try waking up every day and having the same energy and the same buzz and the same drive to do the same job every day. That's really tricky. So you need a team, you need support systems, and you need people around you. I mean, one of the coaching roles I just did recently was not about me coaching them. Of course, I did that. It was actually setting up a buddy system so that every single person in their sales role had someone else that they could call upon, that they could arrange power hours or whatever you want to call them with, so that they weren't doing it alone. Because 3 days out of 5, they were all in a home office and they were all doing it alone. They were making their phone calls or sending their emails for 8 hours of the day with nobody else around them. And that's quite lonely for a salesperson. So that's one of the things that was introduced. So I think we need to get better. And by we, I mean sales leaders, businesses, at supporting salespeople and giving them the things they need. And honestly, it's not much. It's just a little bit of attention, some friendly support, and a bit of motivation now and then. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I agree with you 100%. I don't think the majority of people are out there fleecing people. I don't think the majority of salespeople are con men like those people who sell, I don't know, life insurance, won't leave your house until they've sold you your life insurance. I think they are a real minority, but they do have a big effect on the reputation of the sales industry. I've rarely met a salesperson who isn't like I don't remember what the psychology is, like there's a rescuer in one of the different psychology themes, like one of the characteristics is rescuer. And that's the way I see salespeople. And I think 100%, when I say like the 95% I'm talking about have no idea how to do this because they haven't been given the tools. But they also haven't been given the attitude or What is it? There's a... So you didn't tell us, like the book, she wrote the book, or they did the study. So is sales, are you born a salesperson or do you learn sales? What was the conclusion? What did they conclude?
You can obviously there are some natural salespeople out there, but you can totally learn it. You can totally change things and tweak things in your own belief system to be able to get better. But you have to go deep. It's your belief system. So it's not about changing the sentence that you use in a particular email or something. It's about going back to the basics and changing some of the beliefs that you might have. And we've just been talking about some of those, which is sales is a dirty, trade. It's not respectable. That's a deep-seated belief that we need to start changing. And the way you change that is you change it in yourself. You can't, nobody else can do it for you. You've got to take responsibility for it. So that's the attitude of the book. That's the response is, yeah, sure, there are some naturals out there, but you can totally change it and you can be up there with the best. You've just got to be prepared to, stop believing in certain things and start believing in other things.
Okay, cool. I'm interested in that.
I'm pleased.
I am interested in that. I had an experience recently where I was in the UAE and I'd been in Dubai and we went to see a friend in Abu Dhabi and his son's friend came and picked me up and drove me to Abu Dhabi and then drove me back. And he was there to sell investment properties in Dubai. And they hadn't told him anything about how to sell. So in the car on the way back, it's about half an hour. I'm like, okay, press record on your phone. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to know. And it was just basically a strategy for taking someone from, this is the first time I've ever spoken to you, to, would you like to invest in an investment property? Do you know what I mean? But like taking them on that journey. And the thing I remember saying to him at the end is that this is stupid. Like if you bring a plumber into your house, he's got a plan for how he's going to get your water working. Like if you whatever the job is, like you employ a tailor, he's got a plan for how he's going to make your suit. Do you know what I mean? Sales, they go into their work, which is these conversations. They don't even have a plan. They don't really have a concept of the customer's going to be here and I need to take them over here. But actually, I don't need to take them over here. I just need to work out if they belong over here or not, and if they're prepared to go over here. Because if they're not, then, better just find somebody else, because if I have to drag this one kicking and screaming, he's going to be screaming when I've taken his money from him still, It frazzles my mind. It absolutely frazzles my mind. Okay, so do you want the good news?
Tell me.
I think you are eminently qualified to talk to us about beliefs in sales. You've clearly given this enough thought. So we can go to question number 2. And maybe we'll leave my issues alone if we can resist. And you tell me how this manifests itself. Like, who do you work with and how do you add value in their lives?
So I typically work with large multinational corporations, specifically in the telecommunication or tech industry, but not exclusively. I've managed to fall into that industry and I love it. And who do I work with? I work with the sales teams in there. So that could be anything from the inside sales teams, who are the appointment setters maybe, to making that first call, cold call, all the way through to telephone account managers who look after their clients via telephone or virtual meetings, or account managers who do the face-to-face meetings. So they are like business development managers, account managers, AEs, depending on what industry we're in and what company we're in, they all have different titles. So I look after the people doing the selling. They're my favorite people to hang out with when I'm doing my work.
Okay, so sorry, we just hit on another one of my issues. I'm really sorry. I'm just a bag of issues. Like this telesales thing also frazzles my mind, because if you're cold calling, you are so rarely going to do a sale. It seems to me to be ridiculous to call that telesales. What you're doing is marketing. What you're doing is telemarketing. Now, wouldn't it be better if we just let those people know this is what you're doing is a bit of marketing? Do you know what I mean? And very occasionally you're going to get very lucky and we'll call that a telesales. But it is going to be very occasionally, because those people are hiding to nothing. Like the job description is they've got to sell something. You haven't got hope of selling. I mean, I've sold stuff from a cold call. I've told, like, for 10 years of my life, I was selling from cold calls. So it does happen occasionally. But for the majority of your time, what you're doing is marketing. So wouldn't it just be fairer just to say to these people that this is a marketing gig and occasionally you're gonna get something really good, rather than saying you're doing a sales job and every day you haven't sold something, you've done a terrible job. Do you think?
So I do not really care what we call it.
Okay.
I don't mind about titles, but I think the common misconception or the common assumption that people make is marketing is kind of to the masses and sales is to the individual. I think that's a common
one to
mistake.
Many to one or something.
And that marketing is far more passive. So you, for example, you used to put the advert out there and people would call you or get in touch with you. And so anything that you have to do where you're being proactive and targeting a particular individual or company is classed as sales. But I don't really mind where it sits and what it's called. I think what's important is what you said, is to manage expectations. So when I was leading the last job I did before I became a sales trainer and coach, I was leading the field sales, inside sales, and customer services teams. And my interview process was the toughest interview process that you'd ever have to go through to be an inside sales manager, which was one of the basic roles. Reason being, it was a really blooming boring job. And I didn't want somebody to come into that role and be kind of blinded by, I don't know, opportunities to grow, and of course there were those, but this is going to be fun and stuff. It's like, you need to make 40 phone calls a day and you're probably going to speak to 5 people if you're lucky in that day. That is the job. And I learned the hard way, because I had these graduates who just finished uni and they wanted to develop and stuff. I was like, oh yeah, we've got these great, opportunities for you, and if you do well, then you can do this and you can earn this bonus. And they stick around for 3 months and they're like, this is not what I signed up for, goodbye. So we completely flipped the interview process on its head. We made them come to a full day of work to see what it was like, and we made it the worst possible day of work that they could possibly see, because then we knew if they still wanted the job that they were going to stick around and they were going to be good, and it worked. So you take them through this process. It was an American company, so we had a cheerleading thing. So we had to sign the letters of the company and do this shout and cheer and clapping and everything. So lots of them just left during that because they're like, this is a cult, right? So we filtered those ones out. Then if they stuck, we'd make them do a sit by and do a ride along. So they'd sit next to somebody and just see how boring this job can be. Like how you just have to keep on going, pick up the phone again, fill in your CRM, and then just keep on trying it. And then once in a blue moon, it was about 5 to 10 times in 40 that you'd have a conversation with somebody who would be willing to talk to you. So 25% hit rate basically of conversations. And then you'd have to convert them into trials, and then trials into sales. Ultimately, that was the process of this particular one. But I used to sit there and go, this is a really crappy job. Are you sure you want it? And if they begged for the job, they got the job. And funnily enough, a lot of them are still there and they're doing amazingly because they got it. They understood that. So I don't think it's about whether you call it sales or marketing. I think it's about being honest about what some of these jobs require you to do and whether you're that type of person who wants to do that or not.
Yeah. I do get caught up in the names a little bit, because I tell people regularly that the worst thing, you might as well write on your business card, please don't like me, if you're going to put sales on your business card. That's what I tell people, because I think that's the reality. But I'm going to challenge you again, because I did that job. When I did that job in the 90s, we were making 100 calls a day, 150 calls a day, and we'd get through to maybe 30 people a day. But I don't think that's boring. Because I was facing 180 degrees in the other direction, and it could be I'm going to work to make 150 cold calls a day, or I'm going to work to rattle some cages and make some friends, which was always my attitude to it. I told you before, my goal, my personal goal was, I had a few personal goals. One of them was I wanted all of the records completed on all of my things on this. You can imagine what the database looked like. But I wanted all of the fields filled in. So that was one of my goals. But another goal was, if I qualified somebody out, then I would say to them, look, you're going to hear from me again because there's only so many people I can call. So in about 3 months, we're going to have another conversation. And so the first goal would be for them to say, yeah, that's cool. But the big goal was for them, when they picked up the phone, to know me, like to recognize my voice from 3 months ago when we might have had 1 or 2 conversations. And it's how can engaging with people be boring is kind of what I think.
I love that challenge, and I agree with you. What I was doing was the filtering out to make sure that I wasn't selling the job as being something else. Those people are still in that role because they love it. They love the team they're in. They love coming into work every day. They love the buzz. They love writing the numbers on the whiteboard. Some of them love earning the bonus and seeing that clock up. Some of them love exactly what you said. There's a challenge of completing the CRM or taking somebody further. They love that, turning that probably not into a probably yes. That's what they love. But they knew that going into the role, rather than, I think it's just important that you don't oversell a role like that, and just, it's the making it real. And then when you've got the people who are happy with that, they turn it into what they want to, which is exactly what you described. But they're not coming into work disappointed every day. That's the thing I was trying to take away from our robust interview process.
Good. But what you did, which underlines what I think, is that everything is essentially sales anyway. Like if you're influencing a situation, or if you're convincing people, or if you're leading people. So what you did in that instance is you did a really good sales job. Like you qualified it down to the people who are going to be, like, which is what I think sales essentially is an exercise in qualification. Like from the, how are you? And if they can't answer you respectfully, then you qualify them out, because you don't want that idiot in your life. You can imagine if they can't say, I'm fine, when somebody asks them how they are, how it's going to be if things get tricky, you know? So for me, it's just an exercise in making friends and qualifying. And when people understand that, especially if they're in a more junior role that includes some of the marketing, which necessarily has to happen, then once people understand that, you know, just go out and make friends and see if you can find people who are really going to benefit from this thing. You know, that is an entirely different proposition from the one that we were talking about earlier, where salespeople are, I've got the slides. Like people, if you ask people to compare salespeople to animals, they're eels, they're snakes, they're boars, they're bulls, they're, you know, all these hideous things. So good. We're still not getting over my issues to the beliefs. How do you resolve the beliefs for the people that you work with? And what sort of effect does that have? What sort of outcome do you achieve from addressing those beliefs?
So let's give you an example. There's hundreds. There's 5 key beliefs that the salesperson secret code will look at. But let's just give you an example of one, because otherwise we'll be here all day, I think. But my favourite one is around control. Now, this is based on something called the locus of control, which has been around since, I think, the 60s. Basically what it looks at is, do you give your control externally, or do you have it internally? What does that look like in a sales world? Right, so let's imagine that it's been a tough year and you haven't hit your sales goals, and you're having that conversation with your sales manager at the end of the year. And the sales manager says to you, why didn't you hit your goals? And you say, I had a really rubbish patch. I didn't have the right patch, right? That's you giving the control to something external. You're giving the control to people's GDP. You're giving the control to income levels, what people are willing to give out, poverty levels, and those kind of things, right? You're giving your control to something external. The internal sales rep says, give me the worst region, give me the worst patch, and I'll turn it into the best one, because they believe that they have the ability to do that. They will do things within their power. They know what they can control and what they can't control. So for example, well, okay, what can you control let's take a cold call experience, because we've just talked about that a lot, right? You can choose to make one more call than yesterday. You can choose to come in 5 minutes earlier. You can choose to start your day with the toughest task of the day, whatever that might be. You can choose to make the phone call that you think is going to be the winner to set your whole rest of day up as you want. All of that is completely in your control and in your choice. You can't necessarily influence the outcome all the time, but you have a choice as to what you can control in your day. So that's one of the things that you could work on in your belief system, is where is your control? Is it internal or is it external? Are you giving it, I work with people who work in big corporations, red tape. That's one of the ones they look, I'm not allowed to contact them because the account manager, I can't contact them because of X, Y, and Z. It's, well, then find the people you can contact. Like, stop telling me what you can't do and find what you can do. Stop using the word can't or allowed to, and say, I get to, I want to. Starts with waking up in the morning. Ugh, I've got to get up at 6 a.m. because I've got to get to work on time. I get to wake up tomorrow and I get to go and do a job that I love. Same activity, same thing, but the one is you've kept control of that. The other one, you've given the control away to the work, the job that's made you have to come in early. So that's the way to start to reframe what you're thinking, how your attitudes are. And this is not just something for sales, you can use this in life. But that's kind of one of the things that I focus on a lot, is control the things that you can control. And there's lots of them if you break it down.
Good. And you're 100% right. What I see is... Do you know anything about football at all?
Very little. I could just about explain the offside rule.
Okay. So my favourite footballer is a guy called Roy Keane, who was an absolute monster. He's about...
I have heard
age.
of Roy Keane.
Yeah. The thing about Roy Keane is that he was always in the game. He was always getting kicked and kicking people and shouting and in people's faces, and he was always in the game. And what I most often see is salespeople not quite putting themselves in the game. Like, they don't lose anything necessarily because they don't risk anything. And I think it's really easy to miss the whole point of the thing by a million miles just by not, like we're saying about the pipelines. So they haven't said no, so there's a chance they might say yes. So let's just play here where it's safe. And when it comes to management reviews, I'll talk about my pipeline, which I think is a fiction. So I think, I don't want to, I feel like I've been too challenging, although we are mostly agreeing. Just so you know, I do think organisations do make it unnecessarily hard for salespeople quite often. Like, marketing aren't doing as much as they could be doing. Compliance are all over them all of the time. Like, especially if you think about financial services, etc.
Okay.
Yeah, like, quite often, like for me, mainly what I sold was rubbish products in my selling career. I was never selling IBM. Do you know what I mean? I would have been selling their competition, and there'd never been any marketing go on, and all of those things. So I think very often it is the organisations make it unnecessarily difficult for salespeople quite often. So that's maybe 40% of the arc, and then the shadow of that arc is it gives salespeople the opportunity to another 40% to make excuses in the shadow of that arc. And then maybe if we're lucky, 20% of people are actually turning up and putting themselves in the game and taking a risk and actually challenging people to say, look, let's not be wasting each other's time. Do you know what I mean? If this is never going to work, let me know and I'll go and find somebody who it's going to work for. So that's where I see salespeople operating with their beliefs.
Yeah, and there'll always be confines of the world and the company and the team and the rules, and there'll always be, but there's always maneuverability within the confinements that you find yourself in. So, think about COVID, just to we talked about that at the beginning of this, and there were those people who, oh, woe is me, I can't do anything, it's COVID, I have to stay at home all the time, and get depressed and down, and and that's a choice. There are other people who are like, oh my goodness, I get to see my family more, I get to go out and have a walk every day. There were different attitudes. It was the same situation, it was the same set of rules. And I'm comparing two people living in the same town here, not different countries or whatever. Same set of rules, same circumstances, and you'd see one family thriving and one family really struggling because they'd dealt with that. They'd chosen to let it control them rather than control the things they could control within those confinements. So that's really what I'm talking about is, there's always going to be red tape. There's always going to be decisions made by management that we don't agree with, but you're not completely a slave to everything. You can decide how you go about doing your daily tasks. You can decide how you're going to be on the telephone with your customers. That's all 100% in your control.
100%. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, I'm just laying it down so everyone knows that I'm not drunk. Organizations businesses do make it very difficult for salespeople. But I think 100%. Like the COVID one is a really interesting one because what occurred to me right at the very beginning is like this is either the very best excuse if you want to get off, this is your best excuse you're ever going to have, or it's the very best opportunity because 80% just got off. In the UK, they think they're winning at life. If the government says, look, you stay home, you can have 80% of your money, then people think they're winning at life, But the people I was working with, they were in, like 80% of them were in this is the best excuse we've ever had. Let's send everyone home. And the 20% went into overdrive and said, okay, this is the best opportunity we're ever going to have because 80% of the market's gone home, So I'm with you and I'm agreeing with you 100%. But I think if there's one difference for me between a successful and effective salesperson and one who's not, it would be that willingness or that understanding, firstly, to know that this is a game and that willingness to actually put yourself in the game and risk something, because it's the easiest thing in the world to dial 150 times a day and not have any effect. Like you can do that really easily. And it's the easiest thing in the world to pitch 20 things in a day and not have any effect, So this, I think, is the danger. So when you work on these beliefs, what sort of effect do you see? I was going to say expect to have. That's probably too negative.
It can be immediate. It can be gradual. So recently been doing lots of coaching with inside sales teams here in Germany. And I saw somebody go from too scared to make a phone call in front of others to being the top appointment setter on the days that we were there, because they just got over that fear in the coaching. So that was kind of an immediate thing. They were kind of putting it off, and the fear of rejection and, oh, I'm a foreigner, so they're not going to understand me or like my accent or whatever it was. These things, we put them in our own way and they're not really there. In a lot of instances, they're not really there. And we saw this person at the beginning going, can we just role play? I'd rather do that rather than do real phone calls. And then doing real phone calls, and guess what? He set 2 appointments in the one day, and nobody else in the team set any appointments that day. So bit of luck, sure, that was there, but it was also getting over it. So those are some of the immediate things. And then some of the longer term things are what you see in longer term coachees. So like, for example, these account managers who are getting 5 days of coaching across 12 months, you see them begin, you see them reflect, you see them challenge and go, well, actually, no, I don't think it's going to work for me like that. You see them push back, and then ultimately you see them take charge. One of the things that I try and get an account manager to do is take charge. I say, you're like the composer of the conductor of the orchestra. You've got a tech rep, you've got a technical expert you need to bring in, but you need to keep control of that conversation to guide it throughout. And then you see them move from this very passive role in that first ever customer meeting they were in through to this, like, not bossy, but just taking a bit more control, being assertive, asking for the business by the 5th customer meeting that you've sat in. And that's also like a change that you'll see. So it's completely individual. It's completely defined by the individual, how long that's going to take, and it's situation dependent as well.
Yeah, 100%. And the great thing about dealing with people's beliefs is it's quite often a switch. Do you know what I mean? It's like you could think about it like this, or you could think about it like this, you know. So I can imagine that you can really affect an impactful change on people. I
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
don't
I
get it.
mean, one of the things I ask people is, so I'll ask you this, Martin, is do you believe in Father Christmas?
No.
Is there a time in your life when you did?
Yeah.
It's possible to change our beliefs.
No, of course. No, 100%. And the thing is, I think it's ridiculously easy to change your beliefs. And I think especially if it's, well, because the belief now is like, if you're not doing it, it's because you're a failure. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the belief could be not that if you're not doing it is because there are challenges that we haven't overcome as an organization, or we haven't quite given you the tools, or we haven't quite given you the data, or, you know, so there are lots of different things. But I think especially if it's a 180-degree turn, is you're not here to sell to people, you're just here to find people that this could work for. You know, do that. I had the best sales manager. I'm talking too much. I need to stop talking less. But this gets me going. The last thing I want to say is this thing about rejection. It just frazzles my mind. It's like people say, "Oh, I went on a blind date and they didn't turn up," and they describe that as rejection. How's that rejection? They've never even met you, so they haven't rejected you. They're just the sort of person who stands people up on a blind date. And then they say, "Oh, it's like that in a sales context if you're cold calling," and it's like you're cold calling people. You know, you should expect, like talking about what I was saying before, it's a strategy. You should expect that these people are people who are busy in their lives and don't necessarily want to deal with a conversation from you. So you're going into the worst environment. And if people say, "I'm sorry, I don't fancy it," that's not them rejecting you. That's, you know, it frazzles my mind. It really does frazzle my mind. And
That would be a whole nother conversation to get into, which we don't have time for now, I'm sure. But yeah, have me back on. We'll talk about rejection and what being
okay.
human.
Okay, cool. Let's do that. Let's do that as well, because we are down to 7 minutes, and we've still got three questions to go. Can we overrun by
Quick
a
fire
couple of minutes?
round.
Is that going to be okay? It is the
Yeah,
quick
it's good.
fire round. Okay, cool. And
Mm.
especially this question, because this question is for TikTok. So ideally, it will be less than a minute long, your answer, and then it can go on YouTube Shorts and Reels and TikTok. What's your recommendation for people who want to get better at sales?
My recommendation for people who want to get better at sales is to learn from others and watch others in action, because you can pick up a lot that way.
That was like 20 seconds. That's going to be the shortest one ever. That's cool.
Do you
I
want me
think
to
you
explain
can. I think it's true. I think you can. And
It was one of the things from the it was sorry to interrupt, one of the things from the thesis that I learned in motivation is, in order for you to feel fully motivated, there's a few things that need to be in place, and one of those things that needs to be in place is actually the opportunity to learn from others.
yes,
If you don't have that in place, it's quite difficult for you to be motivated because you don't have anybody showing you it's possible.
yes. Okay, this happened to me twice in my life. When I was 5 and I went to school and everyone was petrified, there was a little kid sitting opposite me called Richard Smith, grinning his face off. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be all right. Do you know what I mean? This is going to be all right. And the second one was my first sales job with my sales manager. He was just a genius. Like, he left me there for 2 weeks to knock my head against the wall until it was bloody. And I went to him and said, like, this is clearly never going to work. I can't do this. And I can't sell anything. And he's like, okay, well, why don't you try selling the media packs? They're free. And I'm like, okay. So I did that for another couple of weeks. And then I went back to him and said, like, the media packs are going great, but I'm not, I can't get these people to buy from me. He said, well, why don't you stop selling to them? See if you can make friends with some of them. Do you know what I mean? And that was like the whole process. That's twice in my life I've had that real leadership. Richard Smith when I was 5 and Marcus when I was, I don't know, 25, and I started selling. Okay, cool. I think that's a great recommendation, a really good recommendation. Okay, good. So question number 4, what should people read or what content should people consume? You've already indicated that there are several books that you are living by.
Yeah, so it would be amiss of me to not mention the Salesperson's Secret Code. So that's The Salesperson Secret Code by Ian Mills, Mark Ridley, Ben Laker, and Tim Chapman. And the other one I mentioned, which again I think is a fantastic book, is How Good Humans Sell by Catherine Brown. And just to show you, it's a really short read, but it's just full of great stuff. I personally don't have much of an attention span, so this was a brilliant book to keep my attention. And it's got some practical exercises which you can go online and do after each chapter as well. So it's great, especially if you're trying to find self-motivation, which is what we've been talking about a lot today.
Excellent. We have been talking about that a lot today. Fantastic. So that's 2 great books. Is there anything else that has had a fundamental effect on the way that you go about thinking about sales or marketing?
So if you don't like reading, then there's tons of podcasts out there. Obviously, this one, but also the Sales Dojo is a good podcast. It's a weekly with weekly installments. I happen to feature on it quite regularly, and it's we talk about what's going on in the world of sales. It's called This Week in Sales, so that's a good one to listen to just to get some quick nuggets and helpful pointers. And otherwise, my favourite person to follow is a guy called Josh Braun, who he does some great stuff on rejection, on handling objections, opening emails, all sorts of really, really practical tips. Excellent. Why are you smiling, Martin?
Oh, this whole thing about handling objections frazzles my mind as well. It's like
another topic for the day,
but
another
topic for another time. We'll do that. Oh God, we'll do that. Okay, cool. Excellent. Right. So now, before we get to question number 5, I just need to check in with you and see how you've enjoyed your experience of being on the Talk Marketing Show.
Well, it's an hour and a half I'm not going to get back in my life. I'm joking. It was brilliant.
Yes.
It was really fun. It was really cool to talk to you. I can't believe it's been 90 minutes already. It's just flown by.
It just flies by. Yes, it just flies by. It absolutely does. But of course, there's an intent to that question, which is obviously if you've had a good experience, then you will be less or more inclined to throw a couple of people under the bus who might also enjoy the experience or maybe just even endure the experience. They need to be people that you can introduce me to. That's the only criteria. So do you have a couple of people in mind?
I do, yeah. I think you would have a great conversation with Bernadette McClelland. She's Australian but living in Denver in the US, and she is passionate about storytelling and fascinating lady, and very, very cool. You'll have a very cool conversation with her for sure. And the other person I think would be great for you to talk to is one of my co-hosts on the Sales Dojo podcast, a guy called Chris Dawson, who has recently launched a course called Sales Psycho, where he goes really deep into the psychology of sales, the psychology of language. I was lucky enough to be one of his guinea pigs on the course last week, and it was fabulous. And I learned loads. So they're my 2 recommendations for you.
Excellent. Fantastic. And if you could drop a introduction, an introduction like Larry did for us, then that would be absolutely fantastic. I think Larry will be going up 2 weeks today is when Larry's will go up. I'll let you know when that happens. Okay, that's fantastic. Cool. Thank you so much for being here. Are you ready for some more good news?
Go for it.
We got to the end. We made it
Third time's a charm.
Third time is a charm. Fantastic. Cool. So all we have to do now is say goodbye for the benefit of anyone who's still listening or watching, and then I'll stop recording and we can say goodbye like normal human beings. I don't think this has been boring. I think this has been, and if people listen to it, they should just maybe just start to think about what is it that I believe and why do I believe that, and is that belief actually serving me? Here's what I wanted to say when you were saying about people saying what they can't do. Like, it would be really, if you were one of those really nasty sales managers, to say, look, if there isn't anything you can do here, then clearly we're going to struggle to continue to pay you not to do things. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I kind of wanted to say. But I think you're right. I think I like to make up statistics here. So I'm going to say 74% it's entirely in the minds of the salespeople. And it's a good job that you're out there fixing it.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. So thank you so much for being here. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I think if people listen to it, like my mission is just to get people to think slightly different about these things, about marketing, about sales, but mainly to understand that if you want to be successful in your business, that's where you need to be investing your time and energy. That's my mission. So thank you so much for being here. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I'm really looking forward to, I mean, it seems to me like there might be 2 or 3 things we could be talking about another time. So I'm looking forward to having those conversations as well.
Likewise. Thanks, Martin.
You're very welcome. Thank you for taking the time to check out this episode of the Talk Marketing Show. If you found this interesting and useful, then YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. And this is the latest thing that we've posted. If you haven't yet and you could take a second to like, share, subscribe and comment, then that will give us the motivation to continue on this epic journey.